Welcome back to Up in the Blue Seats, a podcast from the New York Post. As always, I'm your host, Mollie Walker. We've got Hall of Famer Larry Brooks here, as usual, and Rangers' great and favorite, Brian Boyle. Welcome back, guys. We've got a few games to go over. Not too many big storylines going on in Rangers land right now, but happy belated Halloween to everybody that celebrated. The Rangers had their annual Halloween party, as they do every year. We had some great costumes, as always. We had Adam Fox and his pregnant wife Tate were Gru and Vector from Despicable Me, with Ryan Lindgren and a friend as a couple of minions. And then probably the highlight of all the NHL Halloween costumes, we might be a little bit biased over here in New York, but Matt Rempe and Jonathan Quick as Buddy the Elf and Papa Elf as well. And I think we have the OG Buddy the Elf here on our show with us, right, Brian?
Well, yeah, it's that was from a while ago. Well, Will Ferrell's not here, but yeah, it was a Christmas party.
Yeah.
Supposed to be
Was it
sweater,
really?
and I threw a costume on. Yeah, I threw a costume on, and so did Doobie. Yeah, Remps actually with Quickie there too. Yeah, they nailed it. Good for them.
Absolutely hilarious. What do you, even though that was for the Christmas party, what do you remember about the annual Halloween party for the Rangers? It feels like they get really excited for it every year.
You know what? I don't really remember having the opportunity. I don't. Although I forget a lot of things now.
I was gonna say you might just not remember.
Yeah, we had some fun. I'm just trying to. I remember once going in. I think it was my first year, so Michael Del Zotto had to be a rookie, and we know the coach is John Tortorella, and he's head to toe in full on Mario, had the mustache, the wig, the hat, and he sits in the front row of the classroom where we do our video. And I'm like, you cannot do this. Don't do it. And some guys are telling him to. Some guys are telling him not to. And Torts walks in the meeting and just kind of bursts out laughing. It could have gone one of two ways. And thankfully for all of us, we were coming off a loss too, I think, if I recall correctly. It was great. It was really awesome.
That's absolutely hilarious.
That wasn't really like a party. It was just one guy dressing up for practice.
That's so funny. And if for those who are watching and listening don't see how funny the Rempe Quick costume is, if you didn't know, Rempe has been living with Jonathan Quick and his family. So in a way, Jonathan Quick has been his adopted father in the last few weeks. Serious Papa Elf vibes. And I mean, I kind of wanted, I can't remember if we talked about this, Brian, but just, do you remember, did you live with anybody when you first broke into the league? And I just find it to be such a great tradition that all the NHL teams do. I mean, with Rempe living with Quick, and I know Will Cooley lived with Vincent Trocheck last year. So it's just such a nice, fun thing that NHL players do.
It's just so they can see what veterans do day to day. You know, we had in LA, Drew Doughty lived with Matt Green, which was interesting. Matt Green lived across from like a dive bar. It was really interesting. It was fun. But Matt Green was an ultimate pro and taught Drew Doughty a lot. I was kind of up and down in LA, and there was a Peter Harold who ended up, after LA, played in New Jersey for the Devils for a while. He and I were college teammates for 3 years. He was more established in LA and had a place, so he had an extra bedroom. And it was just him and his wife at the time, and their dog Kaiser. So I would, when I got called up, I would stay with him as opposed to staying in the hotel, which really was, especially my second year, because I was up and down quite a bit, and I didn't have a place on either coast. I was either, when I was in Manchester, I was in a hotel, or at Jonathan Quick's house that he was renting with 3 other guys, because it was like a ships passing in the night situation where guys would get called up when I would get sent down, so I just hop in their bedroom for a bit. Interesting couple of years for me.
That's hilarious. I mean,
and then in New York, actually, Del Zotto, you know, he was a young kid, so they had asked me, so I had the place, and I got a 2-bedroom in New York with him, and we split it, so we lived together that first year.
Yeah. I mean, and I mean, you spoke to yourself living with Jonathan Quick. It clearly is not just something that he's done in the latter part of his career. I mean, this is just the kind of person that he's been in all the locker rooms, well, three of them, the three locker rooms that he's been in his NHL career. And I know that I did a story on it and talked to a bunch of the guys about it. And when he first signed with the Rangers, one of the first things that him and his wife did was reach out to everybody to tell them that they were going to be hosting parties and dinners, and they really take the charge of keeping the team camaraderie up and things like that. And I mean, how important is that in any NHL locker room?
I think it's absolutely necessary. You have to spend time and have a good time and enjoy each other. And there were times where guys, you'd have one or two or maybe three, we're going here and everybody has to come. You don't have to stay long, but you have to come. And I remember having a conversation with one guy who just didn't show up and didn't say anything. And he got in a little bit of trouble for that. And look, you don't have to have a bunch of beers. You don't have to, but you have to be with your teammates. You have to get together and you have to have time where you can, doesn't matter what you're even talking about, what you're doing. That is so important. It's so necessary for any sort of team that wants to have any success.
So let me ask you, is there a particular unique challenge in New York where you have a number of guys in the city, but then you have a number of guys either in Westchester and Connecticut? And I've always been told that has been a challenge for the Rangers because the disparate geography.
Yeah, it's, what makes it more complicated is this is going to sound sort of funny, but their travel is so light that you're in your own bed a lot. You kind of, you can get back every single night. You're not staying out on the road. That's why like the longer road trips are very important. It's difficult. It's difficult to get all the guys together when you're in at home because of, it's hard to live in the city if you have kids. It's not ideal. It's not convenient. Most of us lived in the city when we were playing there, but it's not the way it is now, it seems. So yeah, that is difficult. If you can get it one time, you'd have to do quite a bit of planning, but if you can get everybody and get the sitters and get everybody together in the city, I would assume that's what they would probably do. But
so how much of a factor? How much of a factor is it in winning once in 84 years?
That I don't know. We got to the final, and I don't think we had the most talent in the East, but we were a close group. I think it's important to spend those moments with each other. That you can get in arguments, you can bust each other's chops.
Nice catch.
Yeah, and you become closer. You want to be brothers, and I have 7 brothers, and we have a ton of fun together, but we fight. We still get in arguments. It's healthy. And those organic sort of situations where you're out and having shared experiences, it's you have to do those things. You can't just be work buddies. You got to be a family.
Switching gears to some hockey, the news on the Rangers headlines this week is the lineup was put in a blender, the forward lines in particular. Yeah. And the D pairs went back to what they've been for a majority of Peter Laviolette's tenure and Gerard Gallant's tenure and David Quinn's tenure. Larry, just curious your general thoughts when you saw the forward line changes in particular.
Well, I had thought it had gotten stale. The Zibanejad-Kreider combination had gotten stale. Neither one of them was playing well. I thought even the Trocheck, Panarin, Lafreniere trio wasn't quite as dynamic. They weren't, they didn't have the puck as much. So I thought it had gotten stale. And in fact, at today's practice, Peter Laviolette used that word. He thought he had gotten a bit stale. So I thought it was kind of a message also that we need to be more on point. You need to take more, we need to be much better at our details. And I think that by switching up lines it generated, I think it got their attention. And so actually, Laviolette at practice today also said that he intends to allow this combination of lines to grow. That, he said, don't hold me to it, but because we need to get results too. But he said, I would like to see these combinations work for a while, see how it goes.
I think the more guys you can build chemistry in different times, it's good for down the road. If there's an injury or there is just somebody's not going, be able to mix and match a little bit. Well, I remember when we did this in November and these two sort of had some chemistry and those two might have had some chemistry. It's just more information. It's like, I remember when guys would be fighting it a little bit, they would change the curve on their stick or whatever, and they wouldn't stick with it, but it's like an extra focus on things. Like, you can do things on the ice. I had the same stick for 12 years. I'd mix it up in practice one day with a different curve or whatever, and you'd really kind of have to dial in your focus a little bit. It's sort of like that. I mean, you can really, then you go back to your old stick and it's great and all this. I mean, it's different things you can tweak as a player. All right, I'm a coach. Sometimes you think because you've had success, you can just go out and do it. It's human nature. It's, there was a lot of reasons why that, especially the Panarin and Trocheck line, was so incredible last year. It was the emergence of Lafreniere to an extent, but obviously what Panarin did. I think if you can, other guys might get excited to play with other guys because there's so much talent, and that might just bring a different energy. It might, like a first day of school type thing. Guys are, a little nervous energy, but I want to do well because this guy, I want to make this work because he could get me 25 goals or whatever it is. Those things, a coach probably thinks a player thinks those things, and he would be right if he did, because that's what excites a player sometimes. And a couple guys might get pissed off. What the hell are we doing? I want to play with this guy. We've been playing so well together. All right, well, then go out and play pissed off. So I like it. I think you should always do it a little bit.
He also kept pairs together. He kept Lafreniere and Panarin, right?
Yep.
Ketel and Kakko. And then from way back, but possibly somewhat relevant, Trocheck and Riley Smith, who were line mates in Florida a long time ago. And they had been penalty kill partners here. So it wasn't as if he threw the names into a hat and, and just picked it out and said, all right, this is what we're going to do. He kept two, pairs together. And of course the fourth line, which has been pretty effective. I thought Jimmy Vesey played really well the other night. His first game since May. He missed the, final 5 games of the Florida series, and then he missed the first 10 games of this season. So it's been a long time. And I thought he played well on that fourth line with Carrick and Edstrom.
I feel like it's been really interesting covering Peter Laviolette now for a season, and however many games it's been this season, but he really has been extremely intentional when it comes to his line combinations and the movement that he has leaned into, because I feel like of where this team has come from in years past, having so much movement, nonstop movement, different combinations. I mean, I remember from, I think, Gerard Gallant's last year, counting up how many different combinations they were used in a single season, and it was it was incredibly apparent toward the end of his tenure how fed up the team was with that. It was impossible to get anything going, and I feel like Laviolette, when we were asking him about these lineup changes, he pointed out exactly what Larry did. Well, there was really only one change. There was, you keep the Panarin-Lafreniere duo together, and then for the D pairs, you're going back to pairings that they have, that you could arguably consider their comfort zone at this point with how long that top 4 in particular have been together. Mm-hmm. Curious, Brian, your thoughts just on a coach wanting to not have as much movement in a lineup as Laviolette has in his tenure in New York.
I think he thinks they're slotted probably at or around where they should be. And I also think that they probably wanted more, like we talked about before, but from Zibanejad. So you have to move something around. We move a couple things around. I mean, you can't move that piece without moving somebody else. It's not, he's not going to play on two lines. So and then while you're tweaking it, you might as well just see what else might work. Coach just wants to be able to, play to your strengths and trust that you're going to be able to do it each time. If you have, especially defensively, you have enough up front where if it goes cold for a little while, I think you'd think at some point it's going to turn. I think defensively is where you just need to trust to kill plays and look very organized. And when you can go back to something that's worked in the past, it's not going to be a change that's going to cause a lot of confusion. It looks, predictable and organized.
Especially the
I understand that, and I get it. The one thing I don't like about it is that Braden Schneider is now back on the third pair, and it's he's getting 3 or 4 minutes less than he did when he was in the top four. I think he needs those minutes. I think the Rangers need those minutes from him because I want him in the top four. I do. So that's the issue for me.
I think he projects to go there, but maybe it's the extra minutes. He may or may not lose a little focus, and you have to be hyper focused every shift. Like the game against Ottawa, there was a goal. It was Gaudette, I believe, and there's probably a few different things that went on, but what really stuck out to me was him coming back towards the middle of the ice, towards the net, with his stick in the air, and the pass gets through to Gaudette, and that play doesn't happen if it's a simple thing. But if you're playing too much, or maybe not too much, but more than you're used to, you can slip on different things, and then maybe he just thinks he's not quite ready. Here's a lesson. I'm going to pull you back a little bit. Each shift is play it like it's your last one. That becomes more of a habit. That's young players. That's defense in general. You can't afford, like if I'm on a forecheck as a young forward and my stick's not where it's supposed to be, well, they still have 160 feet to go before it's dangerous. And if I'm a winger with my stick in the air from the point, well, I got my center and 2D doing their jobs, and I can maybe get away with it. When you're a D, it's just that important. So I'm not saying it's him playing poorly, but maybe it's just that's what they really, really need from him.
Before we wrap up this episode of Up in the Blue Seats, I have one fun little anniversary that I think we need to celebrate for our dear co-host, Brian Boyle. On November 5th in 2018, Brian Boyle scores his first career hat trick during Hockey Fights Cancer Awareness Night in Pittsburgh, less than 14 months after being diagnosed with chronic leukemia, and just a few weeks after saying the disease had gone into remission. Snaps for Brian.
Yeah. That was a crazy day. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, fun.
Thank you guys for listening. As always, I'm your host, Mollie Walker, from Larry Brooks and Brian Boyle.